A very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to Race for the White House, where we are coming live to you from New York City. And guess where I am? I am at the Battery Park, which is in fact overlooking the Statue of Liberty right behind me. Yes, there is restoration work also happening over here, so perhaps that view may be a little hazy, but today we decided to step outdoor and get you a feel of what it is like to be in New York City. It's already nippy, in fact it's turning quite cold, but would be interesting to weigh in on whether it's going to be cold for New Delhi and DC as well, because with Donald Trump 2.0, many in India and the United States are asking what this very crucial, pivotal, diplomatic, strategic relationship that New Delhi shares with Washington, D.C. is going to shape up to be under Donald Trump 2.0. Not to forget the role that Indian Americans are already playing in the grand old party. Will they be part of the cabinet, and will that camaraderie that Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi share also translate into Trump 2.0? Because let's not forget, the fact is that Donald Trump is known to be somebody who's very protectionist. He's always prioritized the America First agenda, and so his protectionist policies, will they mean greater isolationism for the trade relationship between New Delhi and Washington, D.C.? What will it mean in terms of immigration for all those who are seeking jobs in the United States from India? We'll be weighing in on all of those aspects in the first half of our discussion today, and in the second half we'll also be talking about domestic policies that Donald Trump will be bringing. Remember, everybody is talking about how the entire Oval House is going to be revamped under Donald Trump, because he is now somebody who is expected to work upon bringing Project 2025 in action. What is that going to be? I'll be discussing that with our esteemed panelists in just a bit, but our top focus right now on the discussion is going to be how Donald Trump will be reshaping the India-United States bilateral relationship.
It is very likely that in view of the election results yesterday in the US, some of it would certainly be somewhat disruptive, but we in India perceive it as an opportunity. A United States under Donald Trump will make a distinction in immigration and mobility.
All right, so if you heard what India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar had to say, he's already made it amply clear in terms of what to expect. He said that Donald Trump 2.0 may seem disruptive to many within the domestic shores in United States, but to India, it's being looked at as an opportunity. Why did he say so? Let's try and find out. And for that, let me introduce our esteemed panelists today. I'm joined in by Harshvardhan Shringla, who's a former Indian ambassador to the United States. I'm also joined in by Lisa Curtis, who's a former Deputy Assistant to the President and NSC Senior Director for South and Central Asia. I'm also joined in by Polly Thompson, who's a journalist at Business Insider, Tim Roma, who's a renowned former American diplomat, also joined in by Professor Salvatore Babones, who's an American sociologist. Let me quickly begin with Professor Babones. Professor, of course, many are talking about how Donald Trump, the first task that he will be looking into is to in fact focus on immigration and reworking the trade policies of the United States. How do you think that's going to impact India?
The new Trump administration is likely to be a net positive for U.S.-India relations. Trump is certainly going to seek to enforce current law on immigration, which means that there will be a dramatic reduction in illegal immigration to the United States. But illegal immigration is not really an issue for Indians attempting to enter America. If anything, it's exactly the opposite, that Indians are seeking greater access to the U.S. labor market through legal immigration. And given that, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are two of Trump's major supporters, certainly he'll be looking to expand access, U.S. companies' access to H-1B visas and to bringing more Indians in to work in the tech industry. That seems a no-brainer given the people who are advising him. On tariffs, there's not much that India exports to the U.S. that's likely to be subject to tariffs. The main Trump tariff opponents, in a way, or tariff enemies, if you will, are China and the European Union. Those are the two jurisdictions where Donald Trump has made aggressive noises. I can't imagine any Trump tariff policy having any material effect on India. The biggest place where a Trump administration is likely to affect India is Bangladesh. The Biden administration, depending on who you listen to, but anywhere from encouraged a overthrow of the government in Bangladesh or outright stage a coup against Sheikh Hasina. The Trump administration is unlikely to promote the same policies in Bangladesh that the Biden administration had done. Now, of course, the damage is already there, and Bangladesh is already in a state of disorder. But I would expect, from India's standpoint, a Trump-Bangladesh policy to be more aligned with India's interests than the Biden policy was.
Right. I think that's an interesting point that you've made. Let me quickly bring in Lisa Curtis on that note. Lisa, I think where I do agree with Professor Babonis is that the whole concern towards immigration is perhaps more focused on Donald Trump's own concerns with regards to illegal immigrants. How do you think this will shape up for immigrants in India, considering, yes, during his previous presidency, we've seen how the issue of H-1B visas in fact panned out?
Well, thank you. Having worked in the Trump administration for 4 years on U.S.-India policy, there are some issues with illegal immigration of Indians to the United States. Now, this issue was handled. There was a lot of cooperation with deportations between the U.S. and India, but it's not a non-issue. It is something that the Indian government will have to work closely with the Trump administration on. And with regard to H-1B visas, I think, there'll be some tension. Obviously, India is a close partner of the United States. President Trump, has been very clear about building that relationship. He has a solid record of elevating that relationship when he was in power last time. But there may be, some within his administration who do want to limit even the legal immigration that happens, the skilled workers coming into the United States. But there will also be pressure from the companies that depend on these skilled workers that come from India. So we'll have to see how this plays out. I don't think this will be a major source of friction between the U.S. and India. It wasn't during the last administration, but it is something to keep an eye on, and something that I think Indian government officials will want to continue to raise with the Trump administration. On the issue of Bangladesh, I just would respectfully like to disagree with the previous speaker. The Biden administration did not encourage a coup in Bangladesh. This is, this has been bandied about. I think it's, some kind of propaganda that's being perpetrated, but this is something Sheikh Hasina brought on herself, and the way that she was ruling the country was an increasingly authoritarian way. She gave no political space to the opposition whatsoever. The opposition didn't even run in the election in January 2024. So I think that is really a falsehood. that the situation in Bangladesh is worrisome, and I think the U.S. and India do have the same goals in wanting to stabilize Bangladesh. But the idea that somehow the U.S. government caused the overthrow of Sheikh Hasina is simply false.
True, much of it has been in the realm of speculation. On one hand, we've heard reports indicating that perhaps there has been an American hand. On the other hand, we've heard reports also indicating that there's been a Chinese hand. So I think it would be unfair to put it officially on record. But let me quickly bring it to now Ambassador Shringla. Ambassador, I think what Lisa was making was also making sense in terms of concerns for Indian immigrants, especially the legal ones, the skilled workers. What kind of an impact will this have on India's IT industry? And is it just going to be too bleak? Because India could very well use this as an opportunity to also encourage its own IT startups and sort of flourish our own IT ecosystem.
So I would very much agree with Professor Babonis and Lisa in saying that the immigration issue should not really be of concern to us. We have worked closely with U.S. administrations in trying to ensure that legal migration and legal routes for an intake of skilled and talented workers from India is streamlined. And I think Donald Trump's approach has been to deal with illegal immigration, but also to provide avenues for, legal migration where there is a demand. You have to keep in mind that it's been the government of India's policy to promote legal routes for talented workers from India to go to various countries where there is a requirement for such workers. So I think it would fit in with our overall approach that we should encourage wherever the requirement is there in a particular country, that you fill that gap in. And keep in mind also that Indian skilled workers, professionals and otherwise, add a lot of value to the U.S. economy. I mean, at the end of the day, the U.S. economy does work on getting a talent pool from different parts of the world, and that's what makes the U.S. so unique. It's a place that gets some of the best talent from across the globe. So from India's perspective, I think we contribute disproportionately to, the H-1B visa pool, to the green card level. President Trump has mentioned in the past during his campaign that he would streamline access to green card for Indian students because there is the bottleneck there, which we all know. And I think these are the things that we need to work with the new Trump administration on. It gives us opportunities to work with them on many of these issues that facilitate access to Indians and also fulfills a long-standing demand of the Indian American community. And I know from personal experience that Donald Trump has a great amount of respect and affection for Indians and the Indian American community. And I'm sure whatever he does will be, to the benefit of both sides in dealing with issues such as immigration.
Tim Romer, if I could bring you in on the issue of immigration, what will that mean, especially when one were to focus on Donald Trump's America First agenda? Will that mean anything for the IT workers, for the skilled workers who, as Ambassador Shringla was talking about, are coming via the legal routes as the government of India has been encouraging? Or let's have it, also be put into perspective in terms of what it means if Donald Trump talks about cracking down on immigration. It is, needless to say, referring to illegal immigration.
Yes, nice to be on your show again, and nice to be with the panelists. I want to right away embrace bipartisanship and Lisa Curtis's remarks about Bangladesh. There was no Biden hand in that overthrow. That was coming from the people of Bangladesh and the student protests. To have people get on the show and spew out these conspiracy theories and get airtime from your station, I think is just very irresponsible for people to be saying things like that are factually wrong. And Lisa, thank you for saying that. And I think there are Republicans and Democrats alike that believe what you and I believe on this front. On immigration, I think Lisa shows keen understanding of the political system in America. It's one thing for Donald Trump, the new president, to come in and say there is going to be certain legal immigration coming from India. We know in America, we want to welcome talent coming from places like India, where we have such a good relationship with people. We want to grow our economy with this talent coming from places like India and Europe and even China, people getting their masters and PhDs and coming to help create jobs and create new businesses in America. However, there will be people in Trump's administration, as Lisa noted, that will be in positions of power that don't necessarily see eye to eye with that viewpoint. And they can throw wrenches into the system to make that immigration system slow down, not work as well, not be as welcome. So that's something that we need to keep our eye on. On tariffs, and I want to bring this up, tariffs are not only something that could be applied specifically to India, but if Trump applies 10 to 20% tariffs around the world and 60% tariffs on China, that may not directly impact India and their exports to the United States. It's going to impact GDP and world growth. And that's going to impact India. And that's going to impact India's economic growth and maybe take that growth from 6.5% per year to 5% per year.
But Tim, I also quickly wanted to bring you in, since you mentioned tariffs. Ambassador John Bolton was also...
How tariffs work and how they work bilaterally and how they work universally.
Right. So Ambassador John Bolton made this very point that Donald Trump is unaware in terms of how tariffs work. He's been using tariffs, at least in the previous presidency, in a very unabashed manner. And so he needs to go, he needs to be more cautious, if not very slow, with the use of those tariffs. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
That's what I just stated. And again, that's a bipartisan viewpoint. John Bolton, a Republican, I'm a Democrat. We both believe that putting 20% to 60% tariffs on, on your world policy is going to have a significant impact on global growth. It's going to have a significant impact on global inflation, and it's going to have a significant impact on U.S.-India relations if that goes forward. Now, the last point I'd bring up is, in a Trump 2.0, he is talking about making America great again. Prime Minister Modi talks about make in India. He wants to manufacture in India. The United States and India are going to have to carefully work through how that impacts supply chains, economic policy. Can we get to some kind of bilateral trade agreement? Or are those two policies going to continue to challenge the U.S. economic trade relationship? That is something we're going to have to carefully manage.
Tim, I also have Polly Thompson to go to quickly, and thank you for giving that overview, because I'm sure that India and the United States also share several economic policy commonalities which Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi both believe in, which perhaps could be cashed in on by both the countries. And I'm going to take that discussion forward with all of you. Polly, if I could bring you in on the aspect of trade tariffs. I'm sure you widely covered that during the previous Trump administration, when we've seen how tariffs were imposed not just on China, but even the European Union. And when you look at the way it shaped up, do you think that Beijing, which has managed to sort of adapt to the trade tariffs that were imposed by Washington, of course, what stood out was the trade war between Beijing and Washington, but do you think that Donald Trump is going to be as focused as he was on China even this time around?
Yes, I think there is no doubt that China is a big focus for President-elect Trump. He has said during the campaign that he'd impose 60% tariffs on the country, but what has changed this time around is that China has diversified its economy. It's more prepared for these measures. And in contrast to China, Europe is now looking like a big concern because Europe depends heavily on US markets. And if that 10% tariff that Trump talked about on the election campaign was imposed, that would have significant economic repercussions for the continent. And that, of course, comes as energy prices in Europe are rising and the economy is slowing. Of course, President Trump as well has been outspoken about financial aid sent to Ukraine. So if he were to reduce that, then that burden would be placed more on the EU, again, rising kind of the economic crisis that they could be facing if this happens. And just to put that in perspective, if you take Germany's auto market, for example, which during Trump's first term, he did impose a tariff on steel and aluminium, which deeply affected the auto markets globally. But if he were to impose that 10% tariff, then the US is Germany's biggest exporter. That's the market that they export to the most, and particularly for the auto market as well. So many regulators and economists and politicians are particularly worried about Trump's policies.
All right. Ambassador Shringla, if I could bring you in on the commonalities that Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump share. We've seen how they focus on technological innovation. Even their deregulatory practices are talked about, not to forget the fact that the economic focus for both the heads of state has been talked about. How much can New Delhi and DC stand to gain from the commonalities of both these leaders? Their warmth, will it also translate this time around into the trade partnership that we've seen only grow year to year between both the countries?
So in the United States, you have an executive presidency. So the president is key to any foreign policy initiative that the US takes. So normally for any relationship with the United States to move forward in a very, very exponential manner, you need the president to be personally, I would say, involved. And on the other side, you also need an interlocutor that is empowered. And I think with when President Trump was on his first term and Prime Minister Modi on the other end, the fact that they both attached importance to the relationship, they had a very, very close connect, worked very well for the relationship. And we've seen great amount of convergence and bonhomie. I mean, there were, of course, many, many deliverables that were there that was achieved in the first term. Let's start from things like terrorism. You know, at that time, we did have many terrorist incidents. We had the Pulwama attacks. And it was President Trump who said that I can understand India's, desire to retaliate and respond to those terrorist attacks in February 2019. Also, the United States helped us in listing Masood Azad, one of the most wanted terrorists, under the UN Security Council's, resolution which deals with such actors. And you could also recall that China was recalcitrant on that. But we worked closely, and the US administration really helped in pushing this through. So on counterterrorism, on defense, the United States made us STA Tier 1 partner, which means you could import defense equipment from the United States without license. We had a great collaboration in the tech sector and space. I think collaborations between NASA and ISRO started at that time. Collaborations, more extensive collaboration, because they were collaborating earlier. So there are a lot of areas in which there was convergence. And of course, you saw the bonhomie between the leaders reflected in the Howdy Modi event in Houston, where 50,000 Indian Americans were present. And then subsequently at Namaste Trump in India, in Ahmedabad, where 100,000 people were there in the stadium to greet President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. So these were exceptional events, unique events, and I don't think it's very easy to replicate those events. But they represented a high point in the relationship. And that relationship, of course, has developed even further under President Biden. And today we have the possibility of taking that, again, a very major step forward under Trump 2.0, because he comes in with unfettered success. He has the support of the Senate behind him, and possibly the House as well. And I think there is the scope to there's a lot of unfinished business the free trade agreement, which we've reached a fairly advanced stage in negotiating, could be concluded quickly. There are many other areas on which we could work very quickly. I mean, I think we share President Trump's desire to see an end to conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. And whatever we can do to work and support President Trump in that endeavor, I think is also there. If you read Prime Minister Modi's message, inter alia, really reflects that we work together for peace, stability and prosperity.
He's talked about shared cooperation also in various areas like space technology, economic trade as well. And I think you've in fact highlighted a very crucial aspect to the India-United States partnership, which is of course involving an alignment in our strategic interests and the defense partnership, which is why I'd quickly like to bring in Lisa Curtis. Lisa, I think we've seen Quad being elevated during Donald Trump's previous presidency, which you must have also chronicled during your term as well. But having said that, should we now focus, should we expect a focus on extending and taking initiatives on with regards to Quad even forward? And with defense, what are the kind of deals and trade partnership can we expect? There's been an ongoing exchange as far as critical emerging technologies are concerned. What is it that you are expecting?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Quad, because the Quad was revived after a 10-year hiatus in 2017 during the Trump administration. There were many meetings of the Quad during the Trump administration, including at the foreign minister level. Certainly, President Biden took that forward and continued to work on the Quad. And so I fully expect the Quad to remain a focal point of U.S. policy in the Indo-Pacific region. And this also relates to the issue of supply chain resiliency. And all of the Quad member states, including India, don't want to be over-dependent on China. We saw what happened during the COVID crisis when the U.S., India, and all nations were overly dependent on China for pharmaceutical ingredients. We also saw the concerns with Chinese 5G technology and China being able to find backdoors through that technology if it was providing this technology to countries. And this is, why India kept China out of its 5G trials a few years ago. So there is mutual agreement between the U.S. and India about the need for supply chain resiliency, which will mean more and more industries basing out of India, more manufacturing coming out of India. We're already seeing U.S. efforts on the semiconductor issue, setting up new semiconductor plants for Indian manufacturing of semiconductors. And I expect this to continue. This will continue to be of interest to a Trump administration to reduce U.S. reliance on China and to look more toward India for manufacturing some of these goods. The Quad also is strategically important. It sends a clear signal to China that the Quad members are standing together, and they're standing together for a vision of the region that is quite different than China's vision of the region. The Quad vision of the region is for a free, open, rules-based, free and open seaways, countries maintaining their sovereignty and independence. And so I fully expect that this grouping will continue to work together and to be a core part of ensuring that the region remains free.
All right. Tim, if I could bring you in on the shifting of demographics, especially within the Indian American community. There's been a lot of chatter about how this was traditionally a Democratic voter base, which is also now, in fact, in its own political affiliations and leanings, is shifting towards the Republicans. Something we've also seen emerge during this presidential election, where it's not just a Vivek Ramaswamy or a Nikki Haley. In fact, you also are going to have the second Second Lady of the United States, Usha Vance, being part of Trump administration 2.0, so to say. But what explains this change of support? And we also know that Donald Trump is going to be prioritizing this community. There's talk about if Viveka Ramaswamy could be part of that cabinet. Akash Patel also could perhaps make it. So what, in your view, in fact, explains this change of the leanings?
Well, I think that is the key question in American politics today that you just articulately fashioned. We are going through a massive realignment in American politics. Usually this happens every 50 to 60 years in our cycles in America, after cataclysmic events or big changes in America, from the Revolution to the Civil War to civil rights. And right now, you have just, said in many ways, we are going through a shift that we don't completely understand quite yet, where the blue-collar worker is increasingly becoming Republican. That used to be a steadfast Democratic voter 40 or 50 years ago. We are seeing lines of demarcation based on gender. Trump was very successful at peeling away male Latino men and black men in this election, doubling that vote in some areas. We're seeing more and more of an alignment or a realignment based upon education in America, where the Democrats are increasingly the party of the faculty lounge, not the factory floor. And the Democrats, the Republicans are more moving from the country club party to the countryside party. Rural voters, some suburban voters. Trump really ran up his numbers in rural communities, improving sometimes by 2 and 3%. And when you times that by the thousands of counties in America, in rural counties, you see where he got a lot of his increase from 2016 and 2020. So as we understand this massive realignment going on in American politics and the shift, we have to understand as Democrats and Republicans, what does that mean for evolving campaigning messaging? How do the Democrats better communicate with these blue-collar workers? How do we reach out to those without college education more effectively? And, as you stated, alluded to in your question, how do we as a country move forward in these periods between elections to a peaceful transfer of power, acceptance of the results, and nonviolence? And I want to commend Kamala Harris yesterday for saying she will do everything she can for a peaceful transfer of power. Joe Biden has said that. It looks like everything's moving smoothly to continue our 250-year tradition along these lines. That's good for democracy. Just as India's democratic election a few months ago.
I need to quickly get in closing thoughts from Lisa and Ambassador Shringla. I'm afraid I'm running short of time, Tim. Thank you for those precious insights. But let me quickly bring in Lisa. Lisa, what explains this shift in the support towards the Republicans that we are seeing coming in from a traditional Democratic voter base like the Indian Americans, which, let's not forget, happen to be one of the wealthiest and the most educated immigrant diaspora in the United States?
Well, I think the Trump campaign had a great ground game. I think they fought for every vote, and they just went after all the votes they could, and their message somehow appealed to all these different groups. So I think you just have to look at how they fought the election, and again we'll see how the policies play out, because there will be some within the Trump administration, as I alluded to, who will not be in favor of even legal immigration. And since many of the people that have voted for Trump are, legal immigrants to the United States, we'll have to see how that plays out, because it's one thing to get somebody to vote for you, but to have them keep voting for you, you have to carry out policies that will appeal to these communities. So we'll see how it plays out.
Right. Polly, if I could bring you in, many are saying that the Indian American community was increasingly becoming critical of Joe Biden's regulatory practices. And so when they did opt to start supporting the Grand Old Party or the Republican, it was also a belief in the fact that it is the Republicans who are promoting greater economic growth with less regulations in place. Do you think that could have been one factor out here?
Well, yeah, the economy was definitely a factor. But one thing that especially applies to Trump's tariff policies that we commented on before is that a lot of the price that is imposed on domestic companies if they import foreign goods is then passed on to the consumer. And so prices domestically rise, both on imported products, but also on domestic made products. As that happened with washing machines, for example, during the first Trump term. So, and many economists point to kind of the short-term inflationary measures that some of Trump's economic policies would create. But like we saw from many voters, the economy was a big issue for them voting, and they voted for Donald Trump's policies.
I think the vote has spoken for itself. Ambassador Shringla, your closing thoughts, because what can we now expect with the Indian Americans to sort of, how will they be reshaping this political calculus that India and the United States share?
Well, there was a joke in the Indian American community, as an immigrant community, that when you first come in, you vote Democrat. But as you get more affluent, you shift to the Republicans. Now, I don't know if that's true, but it is very right. It is very correct that you have a certain number of sections of the Indian community that are voting both Democrat and Republican. I know that in California, a lot of our Silicon Valley friends were very much involved with Kamala Harris's campaign, but there were equal number of communities that supported Donald Trump's campaign. So the community, like any other community...
But Ambassador, I'm in New York City, and I can tell you many who I interacted with from the Indian diaspora in NYC have chosen to vote for Donald Trump, which did arrive as a huge surprise to me in a Democratic stronghold like New York.
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, Trump recorded a 10% increase in New York State, in Vermont, in Virginia. These are blue states. And of course, Kamala Harris won the states, but that's the shift that is very evident. And the Indian community is no different because they're looking at issues that involve any other community in America. The economy, jobs, also, I think, a sort of change in leadership approach and a more stronger leadership, both, within the country to deal with the issues and globally. That's my sense. And the Indian American community.
Will that be any advantage back home here in India?
Well, I think the advantage really is in the fact that, with President Trump in, obviously, you will see a greater amount of movement on issues that, people would give importance to, which is, I think, more trade. I mean, certainly market access will increase because there is an emphasis on trade. And we saw significant increase in trade even during Donald Trump's first term, because despite all the ups and downs in terms of tariff increases, etc., we benefited in terms of openings that were created. There was a 25% increase on $360 billion of Chinese goods, which exist even today. Biden didn't change that policy, and I don't think it made that difference to the price line that it was supposed to do. So that gave us openings, and I think our exports definitely shot up, and so there are benefits in everything. There are opportunities, and we have to be able to see them and seize the moment.
Right, like Dr. S. Jaishankar actually very rightly said that, this could just be an opportunity for India, and we've seen how India was presented as an alternate, especially to being a manufacturing unit, as an alternate, as a counterbalance to China. We'll have to see how this shapes up under Donald Trump 2.0. Going to request Ambassador Shringla and Lisa Curtis to continue to stay with us. Thank you so much, Tim and Polly, for joining in on this discussion on Race for the White House. And with that, we slip into a quick break. We'll be back with a new angle to be discussing, and that will be how Donald Trump will be shaping his own domestic policies.